The air in the Northern Ridge archives tasted of recycled oxygen and old paper, a sterile ghost of the forests their kind had once roamed. Elara breathed it in, the scent a familiar, dull ache in her soul. Here, surrounded by the digitized memories of their pack, she was little more than a ghost herself. An Omega archivist, a footnote in a world run by alphas and betas who measured worth in strength and ferocity. Her worth was measured in decimal systems and preservation protocols. She ran a gloved hand over the cool, plasteel casing of a containment unit. Inside, suspended in a Stasis field, rested a shard of obsidian carved with runes that seemed to writhe just at the edge of her vision. The Kaelan Stone, the acquisition notes called it. An artifact from the primordial era, unearthed a century ago, belonging to a mythical Alpha King, who supposedly commanded the very earth he walked on. A fairy tale. Still, it called to her. It had been calling to her for months, a low, resonant hum that vibrated not in her ears, but in the marrow of her bones. A pull. A longing for something wild and real that she couldn't name. The archive door hissed open, and a scent of aggressive confidence and expensive cologne flooded the sterile space, making her flinch. Alpha Marcus, the pack's head enforcer, strolled in, his uniform immaculate, his smirk a weapon he wielded with casual cruelty. Still talking to the rocks, Elara, he purred, his eyes scanning her simple grey tunic with disdain. Hoping one of them will finally talk back. Maybe tell you how to be useful for something other than filing. Her shoulders tightened, a reflexive cringe she hated. I'm cataloguing the energy fluctuations, Alpha, she said, her voice quiet, professional. It was the only armor she had. He laughed, a short, sharp sound that echoed in the vaulted silence. Fluctuations. Right? It's a rock. A relic of a savage time we've evolved past. He stepped closer, invading her personal space, his sheer physical presence a suffocating weight. He was all controlled power and modern dominance. He lowered his voice. You know, you're lucky the Council allows Omegas like you even this much responsibility. Weak bloodlines, diluted instincts. You should be grateful for the shelter we provide. Shame, hot and familiar, washed over her. He was right. In this world of genetic pairings and calculated strength, her lineage was a dead end. Survivor's guilt was a constant companion, a whisper that told her she should have been in the rogue attack that had claimed her parents, not them. Marcus's taunts were just the outward voice of her own inner demons. I am grateful, she whispered, her gaze dropping to the floor. Good, he reached past her, his knuckles deliberately brushing her arm, and tapped the containment field's control panel. Just remember your place. With a final, dismissive glance, he turned and left, the door hissing shut behind him, leaving his cloying scent to contaminate her sanctuary. Elara stood trembling, not with fear, but with a sudden, boiling rage. Her place. A quiet little corner, where she was meant to fade away. Something inside her, something ancient and fierce that she'd suppressed for years, snapped. Her gaze flew to the Kaelan Stone. The humming in her bones intensified into a roar, a vibration that shook her teeth. The longing was no longer a whisper, it was a scream. Driven by an impulse she didn't understand, she keyed in the override sequence to lower the Stasis field. Alarms should have blared, but the room remained silent. The air grew thick, heavy with ozone and something else, something that smelled like pine needles after a storm and wet earth. A phantom scent from a world she'd never known. The plasteel casing retracted, and the obsidian shard lay exposed, its surface drinking the cold, artificial light, and giving nothing back. Her gloved fingers hovered over it. The pull was undeniable, a physical force yanking her forward. This was insane. This was a career-ending, pack-exiling act of defiance. And she didn't care. With a shaky breath, she peeled off her glove. For the first time, her bare skin would touch the past. She reached out, her fingers closing around the cold, sharp edges of the stone. The moment her skin made contact, it wasn't cold anymore. It was a brand. A searing, white-hot energy shot up her arm, straight into her heart. The world dissolved. The sterile scent of the archives was ripped away, replaced by that impossible smell of pine and damp soil, so potent it was like drowning. The humming in her bones became a deafening thunderclap. Light and shadow twisted, the metal shelves and data screens stretching into impossible shapes, before shattering into a million pieces of fractured time. She felt a violent, wrenching sensation, as if her very soul was being torn from her body. Her last coherent thought wasn't of fear, but of a name that bloomed in her mind like a blood-red flower. Kaelin. The great hall of Stonefang Keep smelled of roasted boar, spilled ale, and the metallic tang of drying blood. It was the scent of victory. Kaelin, the Wolf King, sat on his throne of ironwood and granite, his massive form draped in furs. His warriors celebrated around him, their boisterous laughter echoing off the timbered ceiling, but he found no joy in it. His victory over the Shadowfang skirmishers at the western border felt hollow, a temporary dam against a relentless tide of darkness. A deep disquiet plagued him. It was a familiar ache, a phantom limb he'd been born with, the sense of a missing part of his own soul. His beater, Reese, approached, his face grim despite the festivities. The scouts found more of their blood magic markers near the river. They are getting bolder. Kaelin's hand tightened on the arm of his throne, the wood groaning in protest. They seek to poison my lands, to weaken my line. His gaze drifted to the obsidian shard he wore on a thick leather cord around his neck. The Heartstone, his ancestors called it. It was said to be a piece of a fallen star, bound to his bloodline, a key to their strength. Lately, it felt more like a burden. It was always cool against his skin, a constant, silent reminder of the power he wielded and the solitude that came with it. Your line is strong, my king, Reese said, his loyalty a tangible thing. Is it? Kaelin's voice was a low growl. I have no queen. No mate. The Heartstone feels dormant. Incomplete. 4 generations, the Alpha King was meant to find his mate, the other half of the stone's power, the one who would temper his rage and solidify his reign. He had searched, had met with every eligible highborn she-wolf from every allied pack. None had stirred the stone. None had quieted the restless beast in his chest. As if summoned by his thoughts, the Heartstone against his chest suddenly grew warm. Not just warm, but hot. A searing heat that made him gasp, his hand flying to clutch it. His warriors fell silent, their eyes wide as they watched their king. The stone pulsed with an inner light, the runes carved into its surface glowing with a fierce, blue-white fire. The heat was excruciating, a brand against his skin. Then, the world tilted on its axis. The familiar sense of smoke and ale vanished, replaced by an absence of scent so profound it was suffocating. The roar of his hall became a high-pitched, electronic hum. The solid, reassuring weight of his throne disappeared from beneath him. He was falling, tumbling through a nauseating vortex of light and noise. He felt a wrenching, tearing sensation, as if he were being pulled through the eye of a needle. A scent, faint and alluring, brushed against his senses, lilac and old parchment, something delicate and utterly foreign. It was a scent of impossible softness in a world of harsh realities. A name, not his own, echoed in the chaos of his mind. Elara. Elara landed hard on a bed of damp moss and fallen leaves. The impact knocked the wind from her lungs, and she lay gasping, her body trembling from the temporal whiplash. The Kaelin stone was clutched in her hand, now inert and cool to the touch. Above her, a canopy of colossal pine trees blotted out the sky, their ancient branches tangled together like the gnarled fingers of giants. The air, oh, the air. It was thick and alive, a heady cocktail of scents she'd only ever read about in historical texts. Damp earth, decaying leaves, fragrant pine sap, the distant musk of wild animals. It was overwhelming, intoxicating, and terrifying. Panic seized her. This wasn't a simulation. This wasn't a hallucination. The rough bark of a tree root digging into her back was too real. The chill of the moist air seeping through her thin tunic was too real. She scrambled to her feet, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Where was she? Or more accurately, when was she? A howl split the air. It wasn't the modulated, controlled sound of the pack wolves she knew, who lived in climate-controlled habitats. This was a wild, savage cry that spoke of hunger and territory and blood. It was answered by another, closer this time. They were hunting. And she was in their territory. Her modern world instincts screamed at her to find shelter, to access a terminal, to call for help. But there were no terminals here. No comms. Only trees and shadows and the growing certainty that she was utterly, hopelessly alone. Her grey tunic and soft-soled archive shoes were useless in this environment. She was a lamb in a den of wolves. Real wolves. She stumbled through the undergrowth, branches snagging her clothes, thorns tearing at her skin. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves, sent a fresh jolt of adrenaline through her. She didn't know how to survive here. She didn't know how to hunt, how to build a fire, how to fight. She was an archivist. Her skills were in data retrieval, not wilderness survival. The forest floor sloped downwards, and she found herself near a gurgling creek. Kneeling, she cupped her hands and drank the ice-cold water. It tasted of stone and minerals, so pure and real it made her want to weep. As she looked at her reflection in the water, a movement in the trees behind her caught her eye. She froze. 3 massive wolves emerged from the shadows, silent as smoke. They were larger than any wolf she had ever seen, their fur a mix of timber grey and black, their yellow eyes glowing with feral intelligence. These weren't just animals. They were shifters. And they were staring right at her. One of them, the largest, took a step forward and let out a low, rumbling growl that vibrated through the ground. They weren't just hunting. They were a patrol. And she was an intruder. Kalen crashed onto a floor that was unnaturally smooth and cold. He landed in a crouch, his senses on fire, his claws instinctively extending and scraping against the strange, hard surface. He was in a cage of light. Walls of it hummed around him, glowing with an eerie, sterile white. The air was dead. Utterly, unnervingly dead. It had no scent, no life, no texture. It was like breathing a void. Panic, cold and sharp, tried to claw its way up his throat, but he beat it back with a roar of pure, primal fury. The sound was wrong in this small space. It didn't echo off wood and stone, it was absorbed by the strange walls, muffled and weak. He slammed a fist against the glowing barrier in front of him. It didn't yield. It didn't even vibrate. It just hummed, indifferent to his strength. Through the transparent wall, he saw a room. It was filled with tall, black monoliths that glowed with symbols he didn't recognize. There was no fire, yet the room was lit. There was no sun, no moon. Just this cold, dead light. Rage, pure and unadulterated, surged through him. He was a king. He was a warrior. He was not a creature to be caged. He threw himself against the barrier again and again, his roars of frustration turning into snarls of desperation. Suddenly, a piercing siren blared, a sound so unnatural it felt like a physical blow. A door he hadn't seen slid open, and 2 figures entered. They were dressed in black, their bodies encased in some kind of hardened armor, their faces hidden behind dark visors. They held weapons that were not swords or axes, but strange black rods. Their scents were muted, hidden beneath the chemical smell of their armor, but he could still catch the faint traces of wolf beneath. Pack enforcers. Subject is hostile, one of them said, his voice distorted and metallic. Stun on my mark, the other replied. Kalen didn't understand their words, but he understood their intent. He let the shift take him, his bones cracking and reforming, his muscles bunching and expanding. Fur sprouted across his skin, his teeth elongating into fangs. Within seconds, the man was gone, and a great black wolf stood in his place, lips peeled back from his teeth in a deadly snarl. He was the Alpha King. He would not be contained. But as he gathered himself to launch at the barrier, a scent cut through the sterile air. It was faint, almost gone, but it was there. Lilac and old parchment. The scent from the chaotic void between worlds. Her scent. It clung to the air in this strange room, a delicate thread in a tapestry of wrongness. It was the scent of his missing half. His mate. She had been here. Where was she now? The question cut through his rage, replacing it with a desperate, terrifying urgency. He had to find her. The three shifters circled Alara, their movements fluid and predatory. They remained in their wolf forms, a clear intimidation tactic. The lead wolf, a massive grey with intelligent, assessing eyes, sniffed the air around her, his muzzle wrinkled in confusion. She stood frozen, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs, the useless obsidian stone clutched in her hand. She knew the protocols for encountering a hostile shifter: expose your throat, show submission, don't make eye contact. But these were protocols for her time, for her civilized pack. She had no idea if they would apply to these primal warriors. Slowly, carefully, she lowered herself to her knees, bowing her head and exposing her neck. It was the most vulnerable she had ever felt, a feeling magnified by the wildness of her surroundings. A silent plea. I am not a threat. The lead wolf let out a soft huff of air and then, with a ripple of muscle and a crack of bone, he shifted. He stood before her, a tall, powerfully built man with a wild mane of graying brown hair and a beard to match. He wore simple leather and fur, and his eyes, the same intelligent yellow as his wolf form, raked over her with intense suspicion. Who are you? He demanded, his voice a low rumble like shifting rock. You have no scent. No pack. You smell of nothing. Like sky metal and static. Alara swallowed hard, her throat dry. My name is Alara. Her voice was a thin, reedy thing in the vast silence of the forest. I don't know how I got here. It was the truth, if not the whole truth. Another of the wolves shifted, this one younger, leaner, with a distrustful sneer on his face. A rogue. A spy for the Shadow Fangs, perhaps. They use strange magic. The grey-haired man held up a hand, silencing the younger one. He knelt, bringing himself to her eye level. Despite his intimidating presence, his gaze was more curious than cruel. Show me what is in your hand. Her fingers tightened around the stone. It was her only link to her own time, her only clue. But defying him seemed like a very quick way to die. With trembling fingers, she opened her palm. The obsidian shard lay there, dark and ordinary. The man's eyes widened. He didn't touch it, but he leaned closer, his nostrils flaring. By the ancients, he breathed. He looked from the stone to her face, a dawning, incredulous light in his eyes. That is a king's stone. He looked back at his men. It bears the mark of the Heartstone. The king's Heartstone. His gaze snapped back to her, sharp and piercing. Where did you get this? It was in the archives, she stammered. A historical artifact. He clearly didn't understand the word archives, but his focus was elsewhere. He saw the way she was dressed, the strange, smooth fabric of her tunic, the odd construction of her shoes. He saw the terror in her eyes, a terror that seemed deeper than just being lost in the woods. This was not a spy. This was something else entirely. Something impossible. You will come with us, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He stood, his presence towering over her. Our king is not here. But our seer will want to speak with you. He was Reese, the beater. And he was taking her to Stonefang Keep, the very place the artifact had come from. She was being dragged deeper into the past, a piece of flotsam on a river of time she couldn't control. The stun bolts hit Kalen like lightning. His massive wolf form convulsed, muscles locking, and he crashed to the floor, a whimpering snarl trapped in his throat. The world swam in a haze of white-hot pain. Through it, he saw more figures enter the room. One of them, a female, wore a white coat instead of the black armor. Her scent was sharper, antiseptic, herbs, and the underlying scent of a she-wolf. A healer. "Get him on the bio-cradle," she commanded, her voice calm but firm. "And get that collar on him. I don't want him shifting back and tearing through my medbay." Hands in heavy gauntlets grabbed him, rolling his incapacitated form onto a hovering metal slab. A thick, metallic collar was snapped around his neck. He felt a cold energy from it that suppressed the shift, locking him in his wolf form. It was a violation, an indignity, that stoked the embers of his rage even through the paralyzing agony of the stunner. He was taken to another room, this one brighter, cleaner. He was moved from the cradle to a low, padded table in the center of a circular room. The armored enforcers left, and the healer approached him alone. She had kind eyes, a soft face framed by dark hair. She moved with a quiet confidence that was at odds with the caged beast before her. "I'm not going to hurt you," she said, her voice soft. He didn't understand the words, but the tone was universal. Soothing. He still growled, a low warning deep in his chest. She was Lena, Ilara's closest friend. She had been summoned when an unidentified shifter had appeared out of thin air in the archives, right where Ilara was supposed to be working. Ilara was now missing. And this impossible wolf was here instead. He was larger than any shifter she'd ever seen, exuding an aura of raw, untamed power that felt ancient. And he smelled faintly of the archives, and of something else, pine and earth, the same sense Ilara had been obsessed with researching in relation to the Kalen stone. "Where did you come from?" Lena whispered, more to herself than to him. She ran a scanner over his body. The readings were off the charts. His bone density, his muscle mass, his cellular energy output, it was all beyond the scale of any known shifter. It was primordial. Kalen watched her, his mind clearing slightly as the effects of the stunner faded. He focused on her scent again. She smelled of loyalty. And she smelled faintly of lilac and parchment, the scent that clung to her from her association with his mate. He let out a low, questioning whine. Lena paused, her eyes meeting his. She saw not just a feral beast, but a desperate intelligence. A deep, soul-crushing confusion that mirrored her own. "You're looking for her, aren't you?" she breathed, the impossible conclusion forming in her mind. "You're looking for Ilara." At the sound of the name, Kalen's head shot up. His ears perked. He let out a short, sharp bark. Ilara. He knew that name. He knew that scent. He looked at the healer, this Lena, and for the first time since arriving in this nightmare world, he felt a flicker of hope. This woman was a link. She was the key to finding his mate. Stonefang Keep was not a sterile fortress of metal and plasteel. It was a living thing, a sprawling structure of massive logs and rough-hewn stone that seemed to grow out of the mountainside. Torches flickered in iron sconces, casting dancing shadows on walls adorned with wolf pelts and ancient weapons. The air was thick with the smell of wood smoke, roasting meat, and hundreds of living, breathing shifters. It was chaotic, loud, and vibrantly alive in a way Ilara's home was not. She was led through the thronged great hall, the object of every stare. Whispers followed her like rustling leaves. Scentless, an omen, a witch. Reese, the beater, led her to a smaller, quieter chamber at the back of the keep, where a fire crackled in a great stone hearth. An old woman sat in a high-backed chair near the flames, her face a roadmap of wrinkles, her eyes a startling, pale blue that seemed to see right through Ilara's skin. She was the pack's seer. "Leave us," the old woman said, her voice raspy with age but holding an undeniable authority. Rhys and his guards bowed and departed, closing the heavy oak door behind them. "Come closer, child of no time," the seer becaded. "Let old Morwen see what the threads of fate have woven." Trembling, Elara did as she was told, kneeling on the furs before the old woman. Morwen's gnarled hand, surprisingly strong, took Elara's, her thumb pressing against her pulse point. But her gaze was fixed on the obsidian stone Elara still held. "The king's heartstone and the archivist's key," Morwen murmured. "Two halves of one whole, separated by a chasm of years." A foolish act of desperation has torn the veil, her pale eyes clouded over. A ritual of blood magic, performed by the Shadow Fangs. They did not intend this. They meant to sever the king from the Heartstone's power, to make him vulnerable. Instead, their clumsy sorcery snagged on the latent power within the stone, the ancient bond seeking its mate. It pulled him from his time and you from yours. Everything clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The swap. It wasn't just an accident. It was a weaponized magical attack gone wrong. The Alpha King. "Kaelin, he's in my time," Elara whispered, the thought sending a chill down her spine. Kaelin, a primal warrior king, trapped in her sterile, ordered world. He would be like a caged lion. "He is," Morwen confirmed, her eyes clearing. "And you are here. A scentless lamb in a time of wolves, while your Alpha is a caged storm in a house of glass. The balance is broken, child. Time itself bleeds. The Shadow Fangs will sense this disruption. They will see you as the cause, a key to unraveling our pack entirely. They will hunt you." Fear, cold and absolute, gripped Elara. She wasn't just lost, she was a target. A pawn in a war she didn't understand. "Can you send me back?" she pleaded. Morwen's expression was grim. "The stones are linked. The ritual must be performed at both ends, at the same moment. He must find the stone in your time and learn to use it. And you must learn to command the power you hold in your hand. The power that flows in your blood." "My blood?" Elara asked, confused. "I'm an Omega. My bloodline is weak." A dry, rustling laugh escaped the seer's lips. "Weak? Child, your pack has forgotten its own history. Your blood is not weak, it is dormant. You are descended from the line of the first seer, the very witch who bound the king's line to the Heartstone. That is why it called to you. It recognized its maker's blood." Elara wasn't just an archivist. She was magic. She had a legacy she never knew, a power that had just thrown two worlds into chaos. Laena showed Kaelin the datapad. On its glowing screen was an image of the obsidian stone from the archives. Beside it, Elara's notes scrolled by, filled with scientific observations, and, more tellingly, passages from old lore. Kaelin couldn't read the strange, perfect letters, but he recognized the shape of the runes from his own Heartstone. He was still in wolf form, the collar cold weight on his neck, but his frantic energy had subsided into a tense, focused stillness. He watched as Laena's fingers danced across the screen. He could smell her frustration, her worry for her friend. "I don't understand any of this," Laena said, running a hand through her hair. "Temporal displacement, quantum entanglement, it's theoretical. It shouldn't be possible." But Elara believed this stone was more than a rock. She said it felt alive. Kaelin nudged the datapad with his nose, letting out a low whine. He pointed his snout towards the door, then back at the image of the stone. He had to get back to that room. He had to get to the stone. Laena understood. "The archives. You think the stone there can send you back?" She chewed her lip. "It's in lockdown. Alpha Marcus has the entire wing sealed. He's telling everyone Elara went rogue, that she stole the artifact. Kaelan snarled at the name Alpha Marcus. He could smell the scent of the bullying enforcer on Lena's clothes, the lingering residue of his authority. This Marcus was an obstacle. A rival. He looked at Lena, his gaze intense, trying to convey the urgency. He had to get back. Not just for himself, but for Alara. He closed his eyes, focusing on the faint bond that stretched across the abyss of time, the thin, silvery thread that connected him to his mate. He pushed his own desperation, his own power, along that thread. A plea. A warning. And then he saw it. A flash of a vision, as clear as if he were there. He saw Alara, standing in his great hall. She looked terrified but resolute. And he saw shadows moving at the edges of the firelight, figures with eyes that glowed with a malevolent red. The Shadow Fangs. They were closing in on her. On his mate. A roar of pure, possessive fury erupted from his chest, a sound of such power that the reinforced glass of the med bay vibrated. He was the king. It was his duty to protect his people, his lands. But this was more. This was instinct. This was the core of his soul screaming that his other half was in danger. He slammed his body against the containment field, no longer caring about the pain. Lena stumbled back, her eyes wide with shock and awe at the raw power on display. He looked at her, his yellow eyes blazing with a clear, unmistakable message. Help me. I have to get back. I have to save her. He would tear this entire glass and metal world apart with his bare teeth if he had to. The alarm horn of Stonefang Keep blared, a deep, resonant sound that echoed off the mountains. Shadow Fangs at the east gate, a warrior bellowed from the hall. They are burning the outer stockade. Panic erupted. Warriors grabbed axes and swords, their shouts and snarls replacing the fearful whispers. Rhys was instantly at Morwen's door. They are here. They are asking for the Sky Witch. They want her. They want the key, Morwen corrected, her pale eyes finding Alara's. They believe if they possess you, they can control the flow of time itself. Alara's blood ran cold. This was happening because of her. These people were in danger because of her accidental trip through time. The guilt was a crushing weight, heavier than any of Alpha Marcus's taunts. Rhys, take her to the king's chambers. Bar the door. They will not breach it, Morwen commanded. Rhys grabbed Alara's arm, his grip firm but not unkind, and pulled her through the chaos. They raced up a winding stone staircase, the sounds of battle growing fainter below. He shoved her into a large, Spartan room dominated by a massive fur-covered bed and a cold hearth. It was Kaelan's room. It smelled of him, that primal scent of pine and strength that she now recognized from the moment she'd first touched the stone. It felt like an anchor in a raging storm. Stay here, Rhys ordered, his eyes filled with a warrior's grim light. We will hold them. He left, the heavy, iron-banded door thudding shut, the sound of a heavy bar sliding into place sealing her in. She was alone. Safe, for the moment, but useless. A liability. The same old story. She sank onto the edge of the bed, her head in her hands. She was just an Omega archivist. Morwen was wrong. There was no dormant power in her blood. There was only fear. But then, a sharp, stabbing pain lanced through her chest, centered on her heart. It was an echo of agony, of desperate rage that was not her own. It was a feeling of being caged, of a frantic need to protect. It was his pain. Kaelan. Through the bond, through the stone still clutched in her hand, she could feel him. He was fighting to get back to her. Outside the door, she heard a crash, then a triumphant snarl that was not from one of the keep's defenders. The bar on the door groaned, then splintered. The door flew open. Two shifters in dark, ragged leather stood there, their eyes glowing with a faint red light. Shadow Fangs. Their lips were curled back, revealing unnaturally sharp teeth. The Sky Witch, one hissed, his eyes locking onto her. She will be a great prize for the master. They advanced on her. Elara scrambled backwards, her heart seizing with terror. This was it. Her old life of quiet desperation seemed like a paradise now. But as they lunged, the feeling of Kaelin's distant rage surged through her again, merging with her own terror, and forging it into something new. Something hard and sharp. No. She would not be a prize. She would not be a victim. Not again. Her fingers tightened on the Kaelin stone. She poured all her fear, all her guilt, and all of Kaelin's phantom fury into it. Get away from me, she screamed. A blinding, blue-white light erupted from the stone. It wasn't just light, it was pure force. It slammed into the two shadow fangs, throwing them back through the doorway, as if they were rag dolls. They crashed against the far wall of the corridor and lay still. The light faded, leaving Elara standing in the center of the room, panting, the stone in her hand now pulsing with a steady, warm light. She stared at her hand, then at the unconscious assassins. Morwen was right. The power was real. And it had just saved her life. Overload the core. Now? Lena yelled into her comm unit, her voice strained. She stood before the sealed doors of the archives, Kaelin's massive wolf form at her side. The stun collar lay sparking on the floor behind them, shorted out by a controlled power surge from a medical defibrillator. Kaelin paced, a barely contained engine of destruction. He had shown Lena the vision. He had made her understand. She, in turn, had convinced the acting pack Alpha, a reasonable beta named Elias, that their only chance of getting Elara back and containing the primordial Alpha was to follow his lead. Alpha Marcus had been forcibly sedated and confined to his quarters after trying to have Kaelin put down. The archive doors hissed open. The Stasis field around the Kaelin Stone's pedestal was already deactivated. The obsidian shard sat there, humming with a low, visible energy that matched the light pulsing from the heartstone on Kaelin's chest. He didn't hesitate. He bounded into the room and placed a huge paw directly on the stone. At the same time, deep in the past, Elara stood in Kaelin's hall. The immediate threat was over, but the battle still raged outside. Morwen and Rhys found her, their eyes wide with awe at the two unconscious assassins. The power awakens, Morwen breathed. Now, child. You must guide him home. Take the Heartstone from his throne. Unite them. Elara ran to the great ironwood throne. Kaelin's Heartstone, the one he wore, was not there. But set into the armrest was another, larger stone, the throne's focusing crystal. It was the other half of the artifact. As she reached for it, she felt Kaelin's presence through the bond, stronger than ever. He was at the gate. He was calling to her. She placed her own stone, the Archivist's key, beside the throne's crystal. The connection slammed into place across the centuries. A shimmering, translucent portal tore open in the air in both the ancient hall and the sterile archive. Through it, they saw each other. Kaelin, in his magnificent, terrifying wolf form, standing in her world of light and metal. Elara, small and fierce, surrounded by stone and firelight, her eyes blazing with newfound power. His name was a roar in her soul. Her name was a balm on his. For a heartbeat, they just looked at each other, a king and an archivist, mates separated by an ocean of time. He saw the strength in her he always knew his mate would possess. She saw the fierce protectiveness in his eyes that promised a safety she'd never known. The link is unstable. It will not hold. Morwen shouted. You have to go back. Lena yelled, her hands on Kaelin's fur. Kaelin looked at Elara, a promise in his glowing yellow eyes. A promise of return. A promise of forever. He let out a final, soul-shaking howl that was not a sound of rage, but of claiming. It echoed across time, a vow that she was his, and he was hers. Then he stepped back from the portal. Elara felt the violent, wrenching pull again. The world dissolved into a vortex of light, the scent of pine and wood smoke ripped away, replaced once more by the taste of recycled air. She landed softly on the archive floor. The portal was gone. The room was silent, save for the hum of the system's rebooting. The Kaelant stone sat on its pedestal. But lying beside it, still warm to the touch, was a second, identical stone, attached to a thick leather cord. His heartstone. He had sent it through. A tangible piece of his promise. The door hissed open. Alpha Marcus stood there, his face contorted in a sneer of rage, flanked by two enforcers loyal only to him. Rogue? Traitor. You are finished. He stopped. The woman who turned to face him was not the timid, cowering Omega he knew. Elara stood tall, her chin up, her eyes holding the ancient fire of a seer and the calm authority of a queen. There was a power rolling off her that had nothing to do with rank and everything to do with destiny. When she met his gaze, he flinched. He actually took an involuntary step back. My place, Elara said, her voice quiet, but ringing with a strength that shook the very air, is no longer for you to decide. She reached out and gently touched the heartstone he had sent her. A warmth spread through her chest, a phantom echo of his presence, a steadying beat that matched her own. The ache of his absence was profound, but it was overshadowed by the certainty of his vow. This was not an ending. The threads of fate had been rewoven. And across the chasm of time, her Alpha King was waiting.